Hi everyone, I'm Miss Garth, one of the English teachers and the Literacy Coordinator at Halewood Academy. I'm here to talk to you today about some of the most important reading skills that students can employ and you can employ when approaching an unfamiliar text. Hopefully this quick tutorial will help you to support your child in their working from home. Some parents have been expressing an interest in having the opportunity for a quick reminder and a run-through of some of the main reading skills needed when faced with an unfamiliar text. This quick tutorial should hopefully give plenty of useful information and practical examples of activities you could do with your child to support his or her reading and acquisition of new vocabulary. Later on, I'm also going to give you an example of how you could be using some of those skills when approaching a text you haven't seen before so that you can then demonstrate that to your child. We want to build confident and inquisitive readers of the future, which is why we're investing so much time into promoting a love of reading. These are the 6 key skills we're going to focus on today. So predicting is the first one, then skimming, scanning, close reading, questioning, and showing empathy. All of these together should help to foster a real understanding of the text you're facing. What is happening? It should equip you with an ability to summarize key details and information, to draw out examples that you could analyze, and show empathy towards characters as well. Here are some examples of how you could practice the skill of predicting when it comes to an unfamiliar text with your child. So firstly, you could give your child the title of a text, ask them questions such as, based on this, what do you think the story will be about? Why? Look at the words that have been used. What clues do they give you about what is to follow? What genre do you think the story belongs to? Why? Where might it take place? Who might it involve? Give your child a picture, front cover, diagram or chart from a text. This could be a book or a magazine you pick up at the supermarket. It doesn't have to be a novel, it could just be a shorter text, it could be a non-fiction text. Ask them what they think it might be about, why. If it's an article, ask them to come up with their own headline and explain their choices. You can also use online resources for this, such as the Day student-friendly free online newspaper, which has a vast array of articles talking about a range of subjects, and it also often includes comprehension questions and activities relating to these. When you see a billboard or poster at the cinema, on a bus stop or the side of a bus, ask your child what they think the story might be about. Does it look like a good story? Why? Who do you think the people might be? What might it be about? How might the people know each other? All of these sorts of questions are getting your child to start using their imagination and realizing that part of the pleasure of reading is letting your imagination carry away with you. So here are some examples of how you could apply the predicting skill to a book cover. So this is a book cover of Graham Greene's Brighton Rock. So that first picture shows a razor blade. So example questions of what you could ask about this. What might this razor blade tell you about the story? What sort of story might this be? What might happen? Who is it aimed at, do you think? How do you know this? And some example responses would be, this suggests to me that the story might be a crime story or a thriller. There might be a murder investigation and this is a clue found by detectives. For the second cover, these are some of the examples of questions you could ask about that picture. Who might this man be? Why is it a silhouette? Why don't you think they show us his face? What does it suggest about where the story is set? What does the title make you think of? And finally, what does this indicate about the setting? What sort of place does Brighton look like? Look at the fairground in the background. What does that suggest to you? What do the colours make you think of? What might be happening in the picture? This is an opportunity for you to start a dialogue with your child about the book that you're about to read. What ideas do they already have about what it might be about? The next skill that we're going to have a look at is skimming. So here's an example of a couple of things you could do to practice the skill of skimming. So give your child a short story or article, give them 15 seconds to get a general gist or overview of what the text is about. Have a brief discussion. What is it generally about? What words do they remember? What is their initial reaction to it? Who does it involve? Give them another 30 seconds to skim the text and follow this with another discussion. You could use an online timer for this or a stopwatch to add a competitive element. What else have they found out? Has their opinion changed about the text? Again, you could make this into a competition with some prizes. Another example of what you could do, you could skim read the first line of each paragraph. What is this part about? Why is the writer telling us this? What is their attitude? What does it make you think or feel? You could also skim read a text, draw a diagram or a picture giving an overview of what the text is generally about. What are the key ideas or images that come to mind? Moving on to scanning then. Scanning is a slightly different skill, which hopefully these examples will illustrate. So you could give your child a keyword that appears in the text, asking them to highlight everywhere it appears or giving them the amount of times the word appears and they have to find the times it appears and highlight it. Give them a time limit and encourage them to find as many as they can in the time available, again bringing in the element of competition. Have a selection of random books in front of you. Ask your child to think of a word and find it in the books provided as quickly as they can. If they can't, ask them to find words related to that word, e.g. if the word was elephant, they could find words such as ears, trunk, and so on. In the car on a familiar journey, ask your child to scan the road signs and jot down the route to a destination. This will involve scanning the signs for key details. And lastly, when shopping, give your child a shopping list and ask them to find some particular items within a time limit. Make it a competition with points awarded or a tally. So scanning, unlike skimming, involves looking a little bit more detailed for looking a bit more in detail for key details, key information within a text, rather than skimming over it quickly and getting a general overview. So reading closely involves delving even deeper into the text again with your understanding. So here's some examples. You could give your child a paragraph or short text, ask them to summarise the meaning of the paragraph in no more than 5, or if you like 10, words. They will need to read carefully to be able to summarise the key information. Ask your child to read a short story and create a flowchart or series of pictures to summarise what it is about in order that the events happen. This will test their ability to recognise key details and also to recognise sequencing within a text, another very valuable skill. For number 3, you could rewrite a paragraph or sentence in your own words to assess understanding or explain a paragraph or short story to someone who hasn't read it, such as a younger sibling or another family member. You could do it so that they teach them about the extract they've read. Ask your child what the most important part of the text is and why. Ask them what this sentence contains that others don't. What key details does it tell us? Moving on to questioning, you could do a read-off challenge. Read the same short text or section of a story as your child. Create a list of 10 questions for each other to answer. Read aloud to your child. Ask them what their favourite part was and why. Which character did they like or dislike and why? Where did it take place? Then number 3, you could ask them, is all the information relevant? If you were to cut the text down, how would you do it? For number 4, what questions would they like to ask the writer or author? What information would they like to know? What would further their understanding? And finally, it's all about learning to show empathy, or in other words, sharing the feelings of a character in a story and their, an understanding of their situation. So number 1, write a diary entry from the point of view of the character in the text. What would they be thinking or feeling? Number 2, hot seating. This is something that lots of students really enjoy because it allows them to show a flair for acting. Ask your child to assume the position of a character from the text they have read, and you can ask them questions to test their knowledge or memory of the story, as well as their understanding of that character's personality and attitudes. Number 3, thought bubble attitudes. When your child has read a text, ask them to assume the point of view of different people. What would their reactions be to the text? What would they disagree or agree with and why? You could even relate this to current affairs, and you could ask them to imagine they are a character from a story responding to something that's happening in the news. How would they react and why? Number 4, discuss a news story, soap or TV series you've been watching. Ask your child how a certain character might be feeling and why. What would they do in that situation? What advice would they give? Whose side are they on and why? So just to show you now how to apply some of those reading skills in practice, we're going to use a short extract from Thomas Harris's novel, The Silence of the Lambs, which many of you will have heard of. So at the beginning of this extract, we have a short little introduction telling us a little bit of an overview of what this story is about. So this is where we could bring in the predicting skill. Okay, so let's read it first together. The following extract is taken from the novel The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. In this novel, the FBI trainee agent Clarice Starling has been asked to interview Dr. Hannibal Lecter, a serial killer. So if we were using our predicting skill here, based just on this brief introduction, to which genre do we think this novel belongs? What type of story is it? How do we know this? What do we expect from Dr. Lecter? If he's called a doctor, what does this normally indicate to us? What might it suggest about his crimes? Then if we just read the rest of this very short text, we can have a look at how to apply those other reading skills to it. So, Dr. Lecter's cell is well beyond the others, facing only a closet across the corridor, and it is unique in other ways. The front is a wall of bars, but within the bars, at a distance greater than the human reach, is a second barrier, a stout nylon net stretched from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. Behind the net, Starling could see a table bolted to the floor and piled high with soft-covered books and paper, and a straight chair also fastened down. Dr. Hannibal Lecter himself reclined on his bunk, perusing the Italian edition of Vogue. He held the loose pages in his right hand and put them beside him one by one with his left. Dr. Lecter had 6 fingers on his left hand. Clarice Starling stopped a little distance from the bars, about the length of a small foyer. Dr. Lecter? Her voice sounded all right to her. He looked up from his reading. For a steep second she thought his gaze hummed, but it was only her blood she heard. My name is Clarice Starling. May I talk with you? Courtesy was implicit in her distance and her tone. Dr. Lecter considered, his finger pressed against his pursed lips. Then he rose in his own time and came forward smoothly in his cage, stopping short of the nylon web without looking at it, as though he chose the distance. She could see that he was small, sleek. In his hands and arms she saw wiry strength like her own. Good morning, he said, as though he had answered the door. His cultured voice has a slight metallic rasp beneath it, possibly from disuse. Dr. Lecter's eyes are maroon, and they reflect the light in pinpoints of red. Sometimes the points of light seem to fly like sparks to his centre. His eyes held Starling whole. So if we were to use the skill of skimming, which just means looking over pretty quickly the whole text and trying to get a general idea of what it's about, we might be thinking about some of these things. So we might read the first line of each of these paragraphs, and we might decide, what is each paragraph focused on? What are our thoughts on these two characters and why? So the first paragraph talks about Dr. Lecter's cell and about there being bars and it being beyond human reach. Then the next paragraph starts Dr. Hannibal Lecter himself. So how do those two paragraphs focus on something different? What is the first one about? What is the second one about? Then a bit further down you've got Clarice Starling stopped a little distance. So again, the focus has changed. If we were using questioning for this text, we could think about some of these things. What sort of person is Dr. Lecter? How do we know this? Let's look for some examples. What is it about the description of his cell that tells us he is dangerous? So we're looking closely at the way it's been arranged and the words chosen by the writer. What would you like to know about these characters? If you were summarising the extract, what are the main pieces of information we receive? If we were empathising with the characters, so trying to understand how they feel in this situation, we might think about some of these considerations. How do you think Clarice feels in this scene? Why? Why might she be feeling like this? What might she be thinking? Write a diary entry from Clarice's point of view describing your thoughts and feelings. Finally, if we were scanning the text, highlighted in purple are some of the trickier, less common words. If you give your child a text with some unfamiliar vocabulary in, you could use this strategy as well. Highlight the words you think they'll have an issue with. Ask them to try to figure out what each means by reading around it or looking for parts of the word that they do recognise. So for example, if he reclined on his bunk, and a bunk is a bed, so it is likely to mean something like leant, sat or lay, because they are the only things you can really do here. If he is perusing the Italian edition of Vogue, the word edition tells us that Vogue is likely to be a magazine or a newspaper of some sort. If he is perusing it, this must mean browsing or reading within the context of what we've just said. Later on, if his voice has become raspy from disuse, we recognise the part use within this word. The addition of dis, if we think of words such as disappointed, usually means something negative, so disuse must mean lack of use or not very much use. So hopefully you can see with this example from the novel Silence of the Lambs how you could apply some of these reading skills to a text, and you've got some example questions you could use for whichever extract you choose to discuss with your child. I hope this has been useful. If it has arisen any queries, please let me know.